NATO is tonight at war with Yugoslavia. The first missiles began falling about 4 hours ago around Pristina in Kosovo, whose Albanian population NATO is pledged to protect.
The Serbian province of Kosovo has become the latest Balkan flashpoint. Kosovo's population is 90% Albanian. They say it's ethnic cleansing. Serbs insist they're fighting terrorists.
These are the lightly armed ethnic Albanian guerrillas battling for Kosovo's independence.
On hillside after hillside, village after village put to the torch. Despite denials from Belgrade, this is the reality of Kosovo.
For the first time, we can see the full extent of what the Serb authorities have called police action in this village.
Pictures from the Serbian province of Kosovo show chilling new evidence of a massacre by Serbian troops.
Elderly men, women and several children had been shot from close range.
Bodies. I counted 5 in one village, in a house, on a laneway, 2 more behind a police bunker.
25,000 Albanians used to live here. All of them are gone. These are the people who are now praying that NATO and the West do something, anything, to help them.
Why are the European leaders allowing war crimes, crimes against humanity to take place there?
Serbian tanks on the move today, shelling and gunfire tonight, just days after a deal designed to bring peace.
We've tried to go home 3 or 4 times, but the Serbs fired at us.
She was 12 years old and she was trying to return home. These rebels are the next stumbling block to peace here because they will not give up their armed fight for independence.
Albanian people have many men to die for our liberty.
NATO has today increased the pressure on the Yugoslav President Slobodan Milosevic.
Here at NATO, the planning for military action is serious, intense, and sustained.
American B-52 bombers are tonight standing by in Britain as part of the massive NATO strike force threatening Yugoslavia.
We're acting now on the basis that we're going to have to take military action.
Yesterday's attack is the latest in a growing list of NATO mistakes which have led to civilian casualties.
NATO today admitted and apologised for hitting houses in the southern Serbian town of Rezallë. 20 people, including children, were killed.
Our purpose here is to prevent a humanitarian catastrophe or a wider war.
We will do whatever we can to make sure that these innocent people who have been driven from their homes at the point of a gun are allowed by the world community, acting together, back to their homeland.
There is international law and it must be respected.
If we had done nothing, we would have been looking the way as mass murder was being committed, and it would have clearly undermined the credibility of NATO as a force for keeping the peace in Europe.
Serbian authorities claim it was an overnight attack on a police station by the Kosovo Liberation Army, injuring 2, which provoked their offensive against the ethnic Albanian villages. No cameras or reporters have been allowed near the area of fighting. The only TV pictures from the capital Pristina show a demonstration outside the American Information Center by ethnic Albanians demanding some kind of action from the outside world. They outnumber the Serbs in Kosovo by 9-1.
Special units of the Serbian police, the PJP, which are people mostly recruited from the Bosnian wars, have attacked 2 villages. The means used were artillery at one point, and there was fighting throughout the whole day, continuing even to this hour.
What's the atmosphere like where you are?
Most of the people have been buying food during the whole day. The shops are now closed. The city is deserted. And we have similar reports from all over Kosovo, all the cities. Here, people are expecting the worst.
The violence is centred around the towns of Srbica and Mitrovica. It's the same region where some 30 people died in armed clashes between ethnic Albanians and Serb police last weekend. Britain's Robin Cook, representing the British presidency of the European Union, has been in Belgrade today to press the Serbs for a political settlement of the Kosovo problem involving autonomy for ethnic Albanians. He saw President Milosevic behind closed doors, but was clearly less than happy with the result.
Good evening. I wish I could say that I leave here more hopeful than when I arrived. I have to say that I leave with very grave concerns from what I have learnt in my day in Belgrade. In particular, I am disturbed at the reports that are reaching me that there was a further serious operation in Kosovo overnight.
The Serbian authorities have been displaying the weapons they say were seized from ethnic Albanian fighters. Robin Cook himself has made clear his disapproval of an armed struggle, but the fear of another Balkan conflict in the making is on everyone's minds tonight.
The Serbian province of Kosovo has become the latest Balkan flashpoint. Images of ruined homes reminiscent of earlier conflicts in Bosnia and Croatia. Kosovo's population is 90% Albanian. They say it's ethnic cleansing. The Serbs insist they're fighting terrorists. Thousands of people were today fleeing the fighting, many heading for the border with neighbouring Macedonia, others hiding in the hills, too scared to return to their homes. As protesters gathered across Europe, Britain and the United States warned the Serbs, but stopped short of open threats of military intervention.
If violence is Belgrade's only answer, they will find that they cannot escape the sharp and unrelenting focus of international pressure.
We are not going to stand by and watch the Serbian authorities do in Kosovo what they can no longer get away with doing in Bosnia.
But for the villagers of Kosovo, such rhetoric offers little consolation. They say they're terrified and defenseless. And around them, the fighting shows little sign of coming to an end. Tim Ewart, ITN.
The latest pictures from Kosovo show deserted villages and the aftermath of the violence, as Serbian security forces have sought to crush ethnic Albanian opposition to their rule. What has really mobilised deep international concern is the fear it could spark a fresh wave of bloodshed across the Balkans, drawing in neighbouring Albania and Macedonia. Diplomats were allowed to visit the area under escort and reported that the fierce fighting of last week appears to have died down. In Kosovo's capital Pristina, thousands of ethnic Albanians protested against the killing of alleged separatist guerrillas. Police did not intervene, but mass rallies are planned for tomorrow. Kosovo has been disputed by Serbia and Albania for centuries. It has a population of 2 million, 90% are ethnic Albanians, and 10% are Orthodox Serbs. The region did have some degree of self-rule until that autonomy was revoked by Serbia in 1989. Now Serb security forces appear determined to enforce Belgrade's authority. Diplomats are racing to contain the situation. 6 nations will discuss it in London tomorrow, and they are clearly blaming the Serbian president.
Moral condemnation and symbolic gestures of concern alone will get us nowhere. We must demonstrate to President Milosevic that he is losing more than he is gaining by continuing his present course of action.
So tomorrow's emergency summit of the major powers here in London is an attempt to pressure President Milosevic into ending the bloodshed and seeking a political and negotiated settlement. As Madeleine Albright has said today, the time to stop the killing is now, before it spreads. Robert Moore, ITN, at the Foreign Office. Outside the summit in London, several thousand ethnic Albanians had gathered to protest at what they're calling Serbian brutality in Kosovo. It follows a sweep by Serbian security forces aimed at destroying separatist forces. Inside Lancaster House, the foreign ministers of 6 major powers were discussing the crisis, agreeing to punish Serbia for its crackdown and bringing in a range of measures, coupled with a clear warning to the Serb leader and Yugoslav president, Slobodan Milosevic.
The situation in Kosovo cries out for a political solution. We demand that President Milosevic now commences a political dialogue.
There have also been rallies in Kosovo itself today, but ethnic Albanians are unlikely to be impressed by the latest international measures, such as trying to tighten the arms embargo on Serbia and threatening a freeze on Serb assets abroad. As they adopted the measures today, everyone here was well aware of the monumental failures of diplomacy in stopping the Bosnian War. This time they are hoping to preempt any similar explosion of ethnic violence. Robert Moore, ITN, at Lancaster House.
For the first time, we can see the full extent of what the Serb authorities have called police action in this village. The sheer destruction that has taken place here would seem to demonstrate not so much an attempt to control or deter Albanian separatists, but to wipe them out.
These ruins were once the homes of Adem Gjashari and his extensive family. The Serbs claim he was the Albanian terrorist leader, so he and 18 other members of his family died here, all men, women and children among them. Such damage as this has been seen before in the Balkans by all those who witnessed the Bosnian War with its tanks and artillery. Family pets of the Gjasharis scavenged on the bodies of dead farm animals. Perhaps they too were caught in crossfire, as the Serbs claimed about the women and children. 8 days ago they fled to escape the fighting. Now they're coming home, climbing the hill, bringing with them fresh loaves of bread and a fear of what they will find. For Fadil Idris on the right and his neighbours, the first sight was of Serbian graffiti painted on his walls. Around the corner, the community's new tractor had been smashed and rendered unusable, a bitter blow for these hilltop farmers. Nothing boded well for what they would find inside their homes.
Police and army, police.
Military.
Military, yeah.
It appears some police officers had used the house as a base while they attacked the village below. They'd left their mark.
There seems no other reason as to why this house should have been so trashed, except that these are ethnic Albanians. They weren't exactly the subject of the police operation which took place at the weekend.
The women and children who fled here are scattered in surrounding villages, still afraid to return. And the old men, grandfathers, they wait, unsure when they'll come back, uncertain who will come back first, the police or their families.
Down here in the valley, in the village of Prekaz itself, it's empty and it's quiet. And when you ask the people in the hills, where did these villagers flee to? They say they didn't. They never left. They're over here. Colin Baker, News at 10, Prekaz, Kosovo.
Drenica is a rough, bleak region even for the Balkans. Its people have always resisted outsiders. Now they're encircled by Serbian police. To find the Albanians inside, we passed through 3 Serbian checkpoints we weren't able to film. Along the way, we saw 24 fresh graves, people killed when police attacked villages below to wipe out the Kosovo Liberation Army, the KLA. After the last checkpoint, deserted streets and villages, expecting the Serbs to strike next. The men returned during the day to tend animals. Their women and children have fled to places considered safer. When word spread we'd arrived, a group collected inside a house. They told us they were running out of food and said they knew nothing about the KLA.
I would run away too, but my wife is sick and she can't walk, so I have to stay.
There is no KLA in the sense of an army. There's no such thing. We're all one people here, staying in our houses and protecting them from the Serbian violence. We will die here.
We're not terrorists, as they call us. If we had any weapons, then you could call us what you like.
What should the outside world do?
They should demilitarize Kosovo and send in United Nations forces. They should enforce the commitment made by George Bush and later by Bill Clinton that the Serbs must not cross a red line in the Balkans.
The ethnic Albanians in these villages see themselves as helpless victims, with police snipers said to be in the hills behind me. What there is absolute certainty about is that the gulf between the two nationalities is enormous. The Serbs' warnings about the Kosovo Liberation Army may turn out to be a self-fulfilling prophecy.
I don't think that the Liberation Army is any serious military formation. I think that there are some peoples or some groups which are frustrated.
Senior politicians from the Serbian government found nobody from the Kosovo Albanian side prepared to talk to them across the table for the second day running. The Serbs are offering far less than independence.
We should, based on constitutional provisions, give the Albanian national minority the highest degree of autonomy to the strictest international standards. Therefore, autonomy yes, independence no.
After a fortnight of rising tension in the Serbian province of Kosovo, our special report tonight comes from a place at the heart of the conflict. 24 of the men executed by Serb police in their crackdown on Albanian separatists last week were from the mountain village of Çirez. 11 came from one family. ITN's Colin Baker spent several days in the village, which is about 12 miles from the Kosovan capital, Pristina, and reports now on the mood he found there.
The place of execution was down in the valley, and when the echoes of gunfire had faded, those who demanded Kosovo as their own had forever become a part of this land. While the Serbs' clinical dispatching of Albanian separatists has stunned the people and the region, it has also created a bitterness and intense hatred among ethnic Albanians, which would now seem to exclude all possibilities of dialogue between the two sides. 24 men and teenage boys killed last week and buried on the hill above the village of Çirez were patriots, say these people, and they have crossed the mountains to salute them. May they be received in heaven as heroes, they said. A volatile nationalism has been greatly inflamed, and tradition demands a call on every bereaved family to share pain, to express solidarity, to unite against a hated aggressor. On the day the police came, Jevdet Ahmet had an appointment in town. When he came back that evening, 11 members of his family were dead. Is he saying that they just shot them here? He thought at first they'd been arrested, but they were just made to stand on this ground and then shot, and their bodies taken by the Serb police. The Ahmets are the patriarchal family of this area. Their house, the biggest. They're a family of leaders and nationalists, like most of those who died in the so-called police operations. It is families like these who weld Kosovo's 90% Albanian population into a cohesive anti-Serb voice, sufficient reason, it seems, for Belgrade to want to stifle it.
The father, streets, uncle, streets, his brother, my brother. Your brother? Yeah,
for the Ahmets, this was an attempt to wipe out the male members of the family. For the Serbs, they were an example. For this is Serbia's Holy Land. Kosovo is its Jerusalem, where 600 years ago thousands of Serbs perished in Europe's first unsuccessful battles to stop the Ottoman invasion. It is to be sold dearly. It's God's land, says Sister Theodora. He will decide who lives here. She's been in this Serbian Orthodox church for 40 years, and she has no fear of the Albanians who populate the area around her church. The fear is in the hills above the church, in isolated communities where violent extremism in the Balkans is well understood. The ferocity of the hostility towards Serbs has yet to be physically expressed.
Memories founded in centuries of history, real and mythical, suggest that some form of vengeance is inevitable, but retaliation most certainly will invite further retribution. Colin Baker, News at 10, Kosovo.
As Serb forces continue to attack ethnic Albanian targets in Kosovo, the fear remains the whole region could quickly be destabilized. Thousands of people are said to have fled the onslaught of Serb forces. Villages abandoned after fierce gun battles between Serb security troops and those fighting for independence for Kosovo. The latest pictures from the region show some of those refugees fleeing through the hills and into northern Albania. Many clearly frightened after the shelling and the fighting. Such scenes are an immediate challenge to the international community, desperate to avoid an escalating conflict. So now the possibility is of NATO sending troops to the region around Kosovo, a province of Serbia. They wouldn't intervene directly, but might help secure the borders of neighbouring Albania and Macedonia, two states with large ethnic Albanian populations that could become embroiled in the conflict. NATO forces in Bosnia are judged to have had a crucial role in keeping the peace. But around Kosovo, if they are sent, it would be far more limited, merely seeking to prevent the spread of the fighting. But while such military options are still under review tonight, the diplomatic pressure remains firmly on the Serbian President Slobodan Milosevic. The Foreign Secretary Robin Cook is demanding he stop the killing and immediately renew a dialogue with Kosovo's ethnic Albanians. Robert Moore, News at 10, at the Foreign Office. Up to 40,000 people have now fled the fighting in Kosovo, heading south into Albania and west into Montenegro. A number of options, each one fraught with difficulties, are now being considered by the West to prevent the conflict escalating further. It could impose further economic sanctions on Yugoslavia. NATO could seal the borders with Albania and Macedonia by deploying troops within those countries. And NATO could intervene directly, rolling into Kosovo itself to try and prevent further atrocities. Such intensive diplomacy will culminate when the major powers gather here in London on Friday. By that time, the military option may be at the very top of the agenda. Officials here stress there is a real determination not to watch this conflict unfold from the sidelines. Robert Moore, News at 10, at the Foreign Office.
Yesterday there was a whole day of pounding of villages between Deçan and Đakovan. And as you heard last night, there has been heavy shelling around the pass, Morinas, but yesterday was relatively fierce.
The OSCE are increasing their presence in Albania, as are NATO, who've already established a small liaison cell in the capital, Tirana. But NATO knows, as does the Yugoslav army, that any big-scale deployment would take several months. Albania is a difficult country to get around. The quickest route between Tirana and the north is by ferry, once a day. Roads wind through these steep mountain passes. Aid agencies admit that they've been caught out by the speed and scale of the Kosovan exodus. Food aid takes time, and this is one reason why.
It's simple, right? We don't have enough food at the moment. There's a lot of people. There was a plan, however, the plan has been overwhelmed in the first week. There's much more people came through than what we initially anticipated would. And but with the numbers which have been arriving in the last couple of days, hopefully the situation will become more stabilised and we'll be able to get more food in.
Not yet, though. The mountain village of Tropoja has doubled in size in the last fortnight. Around 4,000 people have already taken refuge in a place without regular running water. Today's arrivals, 250 women and children, will have to look elsewhere. Tropoja is full, and the mayor feels that refugee agencies, specifically UNHCR, have made promises which they haven't fulfilled.
They still have not taken any measures to carry out their relief plan. They had promised to rebuild some houses. Nothing has been done so far. They promised that within 48 hours of the refugee influx starting, that things would happen.
When we visited 2 days ago, there was a large pile of emergency rations left uneaten. A local doctor had said the packs were out of date. UNHCR was surprised when we told them about the situation. Since then, they've tried to reassure people. Today, there was more grain. UNHCR, though, points to another problem. They say it's not safe for them to assist refugees coming down from the mountains.
If the security situation allowed us to have there, of course, like that was the initial plan until we went up there a couple of times and got warned off. There's a lot of guns around the place. This is a very conservative society. There's a lot of things which people would rather us not be sort of becoming involved in.
Most of the Kosovan villagers are being put up in private homes. 19 members of one family are staying here. The KLA gave them safe passage out of their village after it was shelled by Serb artillery. Sabahate Becire lost 2 of her brothers during the attack. All this explains why the KLA want to defend and, if possible, reclaim their Kosovan homes. Idris Gajeri was going back across the mountains to fight against the Serbian army and artillery.
We'll fight until we all die. We all want to defend our houses and our motherland. This land has never belonged to the Serbs, and it will never belong to them.
International monitors say that Serb shells have been landing even closer to the Albanian border, thus increasing fears of a direct attack on KLA strongholds inside Albania. Peter Morgan, Channel 4 News, Northern Albania.
NATO defence ministers agreed today to mount a live exercise in the skies near Kosovo to demonstrate how quickly the alliance could intervene in President Milosevic's conflict with the Albanian majority in the province. Other military options are also being considered to back up the political demands to be put to the president tomorrow. Our diplomatic editor Robert Moore reports.
NATO's show of force is designed to send a clear warning to Serbia to end their repression in Kosovo, a province in southwest Serbia. The air power will be displayed in neighbouring Albania and Macedonia, the jet practising bombing raids. But if those threats fail, then NATO may order airstrikes against Serbian forces on the ground. But there are immense problems with such action. At the moment there exists no clear legal mandate for any military intervention, for the West accepts that Kosovo is part of Serbia. NATO may also get drawn into a possible troop deployment to enforce a settlement in Kosovo. And an attack could well tilt the balance of power towards the guerrillas fighting for independence, an outcome also opposed by the West. But with such images of European refugees in distress and displaced by fighting, there is immense pressure to act, and for the West to try and contain the crisis, not simply watch helplessly as the crisis unfolds.
The events have so disgusted the international community. NATO defence ministers have risen to the challenge. The planning is underway and the message is clear and unambiguous to Belgrade. Think again, change your mind, change your tactics.
So there's been plenty of tough talking on Kosovo today, but so there was on the eve of the Bosnian War, and that cost hundreds of thousands of lives. The real test for the foreign ministers who are gathering here at Lancaster House tomorrow is whether they have the political will to act quickly and decisively this time. Robert Moore, News at 10, Lancaster House.
The deserted village of Smolica on the western edge of Kosovo. Houses show the mark of Yugoslav tank and artillery shells and rocket-propelled grenades. The aim, to drive Albanian Kosovans out of their homes. There was a battle here between the Kosovo Liberation Army and Yugoslav forces, but there was also looting and fear. It's more visual evidence of the excessive force being used by the Serb-led Yugoslav army. These pictures were filmed for us by a Kosovan fighter who was returning to his family village.
This is the effects of ordnance actually entering the building.
We showed the Smolica pictures to Bill Foxton, who's monitoring the fighting for the OSCE.
Oh, that's classic of 30mm, the 2 impacts. Normally you wouldn't use that against buildings.
What would that be normally used for?
Against other armoured vehicles, or aircraft. This kind of shelling is obviously a terror for people. This is barbaric, basically. This is something we've seen before in Bosnia, and we'd hope never to see it again. This was the tactics that the Serbs used in Bosnia, and at that time we used the word ethnic cleansing. And And we're starting to see the same sort of tactics, the same kind of terror, which is unacceptable.
Villagers told us how the KLA had given them safe passage out of Smolica after it was attacked. From the relative safety of Albania, one young woman told us what happened when 35 women and children came under fire in a house.
We hid the children behind the furniture so they wouldn't be hit by the bullets which were flying around. The kids were crying, so sometimes we had to cover their mouths so their crying wouldn't be heard. We were terrified there would be a massacre like there had been in Drenica.
While NATO discussed its options in Brussels, the American military attaché was heading for the border. Air exercises over Albanian and Macedonian airspace may start in 2 days. And NATO flights will focus on these hills overlooking the Marina Valley in Kosovo. From Kamenica, villagers have seen Yugoslav troops reinforcing the border, 120 extra soldiers, according to EC monitors. Muharrem Yakupai told us how he'd seen the troop convoy close to KLA arms routes and watched villages like Smolica under fire. Each night the sound of artillery fire reverberates around the Marina Valley. While NATO talks, the war in Kosovo goes on. Peter Morgan, Channel 4 News in Kamenica on the Albanian-Kosovan border.
Belgrade really has to look very carefully at the strong, firm messages that are coming, not just from the contact group, but from NATO, the support that's gathering at the UN for a Security Council resolution, the fact that today Russia signed up for the same demands as the rest of the G8 countries. Mr. Milosevic would be making a very big mistake if he imagined that the international community is going to be as slow to react in Kosovo as it was in Bosnia.
How much time has he got to react?
Today's communique demands immediate action. Unlike the previous meetings of the contact group, we haven't given him a date in the future. We said we want to see these steps implemented now.
But if we come back to you in a week's time and he's done nothing, what then?
If he returns to the kind of offensive that we've seen last week, then we will be taking steps that will make sure that we can try and halt that violence.
That means physical steps?
Well, we have said all options are open. We have reviewed all those options within NATO. We have prepared all those options. They are available to us and none of them are ruled out. And that is why we also want to make sure that in the United Nations we get the resolution that will give us the mandate to take those steps. Today's communique, which included Russia, does actually say that if President Milosevic does not take the steps we demand, then we will consider measures, including those authorized by that resolution in the UN.
But there's one thing he knows, and that is that you want an independent Kosovo as little as he does, because the implications for the surrounding potential conflicts in Macedonia, Greece, and the rest of it are too awful to comprehend.
Well, there is no doubt that an independent Kosovo is not something that is sought by the neighbouring countries for the very reason that they're concerned about the impact on their stability. Equally, for the same reason, the current violence and the escalation of the war inside Kosovo is something that is causing grave concern to those very same countries about their own security. That is why we've got to stop the violence. That's why we've got to get round the negotiating table and find a formula which would be acceptable and provide a permanent, peaceful resolution.
So finally, Foreign Secretary, I mean, what is the test of his compliance? Immediate cessation of violence against his own people?
The test must be that he must cease from anything like the action that we saw last week, which uses military might against civilian centres. Secondly, he must allow in the international community, monitors, the Red Cross, humanitarian relief, let the refugees get back. If he does that, then we could manage to achieve a ceasefire which would open up the possibility of a political solution, and he should start taking those steps now.
Serbian and Albanian separatist forces in Kosovo appeared tonight to be mobilizing for another round of a battle which started last week. It's over a strategically important open-cast mine, first seized by separatists, then retaken by the Serbs. The battleground is a few miles to the west of Pristina, the Kosovo capital. Our Foreign Affairs editor Robert Moore reports from there.
These are the lightly armed ethnic Albanian guerrillas battling for Kosovo's independence. Fighting in a land they know well, but always moving fast. for they face the far better equipped Serb security forces. These police units, along with Serb special forces, are being blamed by the West for forcing tens of thousands of ethnic Albanian villagers to flee. But there are also signs of deep insecurity in the Serb population. In this Serb village, locals have formed their own militia. Armed with shotguns and hunting rifles, they patrol the fields to repel any attack by the guerrillas. Some of the buildings in the village of Ade were still smouldering when we arrived. 5,000 people have fled from here alone. Serb forces retook the town, seeking to reverse recent tactical gains by the fighters of the Kosovo Liberation Army. This is not a war of decisive battles, but rather of running skirmishes. But the effects are brutal. Whole tracts of land simply abandoned. And whatever the diplomats say, the prospects of an immediate ceasefire seem extremely remote. Talk in the West of NATO intervention is dismissed here by both sides, who are too busy fighting to worry about external diplomacy. And the guerrillas have no clear chain of command, so negotiating any end to this conflict appears almost an impossible task. Robert Moore, News at 10, Kosovo. It may already be too late to negotiate a ceasefire in this province. Pictures have emerged today of the scale of the mobilization of rebel fighters, gathered for the funeral of a senior commander. Among these ethnic Albanians, fighting for independence from Serbia, there appears a growing self-confidence that may well frustrate the efforts of diplomats seeking a settlement based on compromise. There is no clear or coherent leadership among the guerrillas of the Kosovo Liberation Army, but at successive roadblocks we found them opposed to any ceasefire. The accelerating diplomacy may have no impact on the ground. This rebel fighter was among several who told us the fighting seems certain to escalate. Into this explosive mix of ethnic politics and sporadic fighting, the outside world sent their first convoy of monitors to the region. Today, senior diplomats could only stare at ruined ethnic Albanian villages. International observers will now start daily patrols. Such monitoring as this is largely symbolic, and in that lies a danger. For diplomatic observers without military backup can be abused or ignored by both sides. It was one of the acknowledged mistakes of the Bosnian War, and could yet be repeated here. For dozens of once thriving communities, international involvement in Kosovo has come too late. Over 80,000 people have abandoned their villages and fled the fighting.
All right.
Now we're in Lausanne. Where should we meet you?
You should come to Veve.
Veve, yes. I noticed. How far is that from Lausanne?
20 kilometers.
20 kilometers. And where should we go there?
You go to the railway station, which is easiest to find.
Okay. We'd been trying to arrange an interview with a group based in Switzerland called the Popular Movement of Kosovo. They were wary of fixing a time and a place, so even after we'd left Britain we weren't sure of how and where we'd meet up. The final leg took us along the north shore of Lake Geneva. We were taken into a flat and met Badil Mahmouti. On the computer, a website featuring the Kosovo Liberation Army, known in Albanian as the UCK. Mr. Mahmouti, once jailed for 7 years in Serbia, was the man who today complained of the blocking of the bank accounts, and he's thought to have negotiated with senior American diplomats last month on behalf of the UCK.
Lëvizja, si organizatë politike, që në krijimin e saj ka dhënë një kontribut shumë të rëndësishëm. Me paraqitjen e UÇK-s në skenën politike, ajo I ka caktuar vetes si obligim organizativ ta mbrojë politikisht, ta arsyetojë politikisht ekzistencën edhe domosdoshmërinë e ekzistencës së UÇK-s, ta përkrahë moralisht dhe ta ndihmojë financiarisht.
Weapons banned for the Kosovo Liberation Army, such as this recent seizure at an Albanian port, are the reason the funds in Switzerland have been blocked. The main Western countries are trying to clamp down on the purchase of arms, but it's an unrealistic aim, given the determination of Albanians abroad to send money home to Kosovo. Large numbers of Albanians live in West Europe. There are some 150,000 in Switzerland, guest workers and political refugees. Among them, the Popular Movement of Kosovo runs a fund called the Motherland Calls. The amount in the bank account is a closely guarded secret. Germany has an Albanian population of 250,000, mostly people from Kosovo. The Kosovo self-styled government in exile is based there. It operates bank accounts which go into the Solidarity Fund. Then all the money collected among exiles is taken by volunteers via Albania to Kosovo. It amounts to tens of millions of pounds annually. For the past 6 years, Albanians have been asked to contribute at least 3% of their income. A great deal more than that is donated by some. Dashmira Hassani Stenger, an Albanian living in Munich, says she's given several thousand Deutschmarks to the Motherland Call's account. Although no officials will say the money is spent on weapons, Dashmira assumes it will be, and is quite happy about it. The money which you have donated, do you know what it goes to, what it will buy?
Ja, ich denke für alles, was für die Verteidigung nötig ist. Für die Verteidigung und Befreiung.
Does that include weapons, do you think?
Of course.
It was also in southern Germany that we met the leader of the Kosovo Albanians government in exile, chosen in unofficial elections 6 years ago. Buja Bukoshi decided to talk to us in a hotel lobby. The Solidarity Fund, which he controls, pays for Albanian education and health services inside Kosovo, not for weapons, he says. But he's angry about the West's efforts to block any funds.
Apart from immorality to try to stop defenseless people to try to defend themselves, and it's politically it's a catastrophe, and it's a concession more to Milosevic, a green light to Milosevic to continue to kill my people.
Groups of Kosovo Albanians gather in hundreds of clubs across Europe, such as this one in Germany. As the crisis in their homeland worsens, the will to help their own people back home is growing. It's unlikely any action by their host countries will prevent them getting money through to fund the armed struggle for independence.
Good evening. NATO went on standby tonight to begin a military operation to force an end to the fighting in Kosovo. It comes as News at 10 found evidence of a new Serbian offensive. NATO commanders have finalized a range of options, though the United Nations has asked for more fine-tuning. UN anger has grown after Serbia failed to keep a promise to end its push against the Kosovo Liberation Army, an ethnic Albanian group demanding independence. Some of the worst fighting today was in central Kosovo, where our reporter Colin Baker saw the village of Rezallë come under fierce bombardment.
In the mountains of central Kosovo, Albanian separatists make the Serb forces fight dearly for every foot of ground gained. This is the village of Rezallë. Few had heard of it before today. Little will be left of it tomorrow. It is, though, a KLA stronghold, one of many the Serbs are determined to eliminate. For them, this is an anti-terrorist operation, a fight against people who prefer the gun to dialogue. It is a philosophy held by both sides.
This is the second day of the battle to take this village. We're on a ridge overlooking it. We can see tanks surrounding it. There are some soldiers on some of the streets, but they don't seem to be any closer to taking the village as yet.
5 days ago, President Milosevic told European diplomats the Yugoslav operation in Kosovo was over. The KLA, trapped in this region, say their war is only just beginning. It's difficult to see what NATO could have done for the village of Rezallë today. Threats haven't worked in the past, and the West doesn't want the KLA to emerge victorious. What it does want is to avoid further fragmentation in the Balkans, and for both sides to begin immediate talks. But this is no longer a limited operation, certainly not one being wound down. Along roads in western Kosovo near the Albanian border, government forces are coming under attack from both east and west. They control essential corridors, but not all the land on either side, and to pull out now would be for the Serbs an unthinkable admission of defeat.
Peter Morgan now. Maki Shinohara from the United Nations High Commission for Refugees has just got back from Kosovo. She joins us now from Geneva. Good evening.
Good evening.
How bad is it there now?
Well, certainly the current situation is extremely worrying. Since this recent fighting broke out in central Kosovo, we have really had difficulty in accessing people. When the fighting was ongoing, we simply did not know what was happening to the people and where these people were fleeing to. Towards the weekend, we did manage to reach some of these people, a very tiny portion of them, who were sheltered in makeshift shelters up in the mountains. and the conditions of them were very, very bad. We managed to send a small convoy in over the weekend with basic supplies such as water and biscuits.
It looks so like Bosnia in so many ways. Do you think it is already getting into that kind of scenario in terms of the cat and mouse game being played between the Serbs and the international community?
Certainly, during the last week when this was going on, we very much feared that we might be actually looking at another Bosnia. However, the access issue has been improved, and we are, every day we're going out to search for these people and to find where exactly these people are.
Do you think it's getting worse? I mean, do you think it's slipping towards Bosnian types of proportions?
Yes, if this continues, it's very much worrying that we might actually see a similar thing that we've seen in Bosnia.
Marki Shinohara, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you.
The dust swirls and the valley echoes to the sound of a fleet of little tractors, lifesavers for the ethnic Albanians of central Kosovo, now fleeing before the fighting between separatist gunmen and Serb forces. Some families run with nothing except each other. No one knows precisely how many have become refugees, perhaps between 100 and 150,000. Many have been sheltered in hill villages, others wander aimlessly on mountain tracks in an area decreasing daily as the Serbs gain more ground. This is part of an extended family of around about 40 people, including many children. They've been on the road now for about 4 days since the latest offensive against the KLA began. They don't know where they're going to go. They have no particular destination in mind. All they know is that the direction is going to be as far away from the Serb guns as possible. They were managing for food, she said, but water was now a problem. When does she think it might be safe to return home? We don't have anything to return to, she said. The hill paths are barely passable now, with refugees travelling in different directions. In a few months' time, when the winter comes, little will move along here, refugees or aid supplies, and there's very little of that getting through at the moment. This family said they were short of food. They said they thought someone would bring them something this evening, but they didn't know who or when. And Kosovo still smoulders this evening. It seems recent lessons elsewhere in the Balkans have still to be learned here. Colin Baker, News at 10, Central Kosovo.
Judging by the amount of Serbian hardware moving around in Kosovo, Belgrade doesn't seem all that worried about NATO's attempts at flexing its muscles nearby. Over the weekend, Serbian special forces captured the last big Kosovo Liberation Army stronghold, Unic, and displayed weapons seized from the rebels. It's a final victory in a campaign which for the past month has been thumbing its nose at the West's demand for a ceasefire. As the world and the demoralized local Albanians look on helplessly, the Serbs say they've got every right to crush the rebels.
Niko ne traži ni od jedne zemlje da se ne bori protiv terorizma, uključujući i vašu zemlju. Da li neko od vas traži da prekinete akcije protiv terorista? Da li neko traži od Španije da prekine borbu protiv terorizma? Da li neko traži to od Francuske i tako dalje?
Terrorism or liberation struggle, an argument irrelevant to this refugee family huddling in a shack. Half of them are nursing wounds they got in a Serb attack on their home. 5-year-old Jelane doesn't want treatment for his injured eye and won't eat. He's pining for his 2 sisters who were killed. Above the village, the cemetery where the 2 girls, one aged 9, the other 11, have just been buried. The Serbian forces say they only target rebels, but their tactics include indiscriminate long-distance shelling. Everyone we met told us the shells and sniper fire come from a Serb position on this TV tower. Villages under it have been largely abandoned. People only sneak back from time to time. We went looking for the inhabitants and found them living rough in the forest nearby. It was a pitiful sight, and some of these families have been here since April. There are no medicines and a serious lack of water. It's thought up to 200,000 Kosovo Albanians have been driven out of their homes since March, more than a tenth of the whole population. How long can you survive like this if it gets colder and wetter in the autumn and the winter? Just a couple of 100 miles to the west, NATO is deploying billions of pounds worth of its latest military hardware in what's being called a show of strength. Yet here, these people are having to live in the Stone Age because they daren't even walk out of this forest back to their homes. Do you think that the outside world, America, Great Britain, will come and help?
If they are willing to help us, they will help us, but they are not willing, it seems.
As the Serbian forces demolish Kosovo Liberation Army bunkers, hopes of a negotiated settlement seem as far away as ever. The rebels have in recent days changed their tactics and appointed a political wing, but its leader puts more faith in continuing guerrilla warfare than peace talks.
We have will, which the Serbian regime have not. Serbian regime have many weapons, but Serbian regime have not men who are ready to die for Kosovo. Albanian people have many men to die for our liberty.
And whatever damage the vastly superior Serbian weapons have inflicted on Kosovo Albanian communities in the last month of fighting, the rebels simply won't fade away. We went to this hilltop village, which was captured by the Serbs 2 weeks ago. The Kosovo Liberation Army are back in control. They may be camera shy at the moment, but with machine guns and defiance in plentiful supply, they're a permanent factor and are a continuing source of irritation to both the Serbian government and the West. Gabi Rado, Channel 4 News, Kosovo.
Good evening. Pictures from the Serbian province of Kosovo show chilling new evidence of a massacre by Serbian troops. The dead, ordinary people, ethnic Albanians, victims of the conflict there. Among the bodies, women, children and old people who couldn't get away. The Serbs say the fighting stopped a long time ago and their troops are back in barracks. Tonight, the Foreign Secretary Robin Cook said the murderers must be brought to justice. Our foreign news correspondent Paul Davis reports.
On hillside after hillside, village after village put to the torch. Despite denials from Belgrade, this is the reality of Kosovo, where independent observers say the darkest crimes against humanity have been committed against a civilian population. This is the body of a young child, one of 18 corpses found 20 miles from the regional capital, Pristina. Elderly men, women and several children had been shot from close range. Survivors claimed masked men wearing Serbian police uniforms carried out the massacre. Independent witnesses say many of the bodies had been mutilated. The Foreign Secretary in Blackpool for the Labour Party conference says an emergency meeting of the UN Security Council will be held to agree a NATO response to the atrocity.
I'm appalled by the massacre in Kosovo. Most of those killed were women and children. This was not an act of war. It was plain, cold murder.
Liberal Democrat leader Paddy Ashdown, who visited Kosovo earlier this week, has himself been hearing stories of atrocities committed by the Serbian security forces. The Ashdown team took along a camera to film devastated communities and record the stories of the survivors.
And he was cut. The throat was cut, 2 arms and legs.
Mr. Ashdown was told how after death civilians had been mutilated. He found other survivors of the Serbian offensive hiding in the mountains, living in rough shelters, too terrified to return to their villages.
I had been amongst the villages being burned on the day before, at precisely the time the Yugoslav authorities were saying that the operation had ended. It hasn't. If anything, it's gathering pace. And it is an example of medieval barbarism.
Ironically, Paddy Ashdown believes the Serbian army will now withdraw as the job they set out to do has been completed. Paul Davis, ITN.
No decision on military action is likely to be made until the UN Chief Kofi Annan presents his report early next week. That report will say one way or the other whether President Milosevic has complied with the UN resolution calling for an immediate ceasefire and the withdrawal of troops from Kosovo. If member states decide the report's damning enough, airstrikes could follow within a week. So how ready are the NATO allies? So far, they've assigned specific aircraft that would be used in an attack, but they haven't yet given the Allied Supreme Commander the authority to use those planes, an indication that strikes aren't imminent. They'd probably fly out from Italy, mainly from the airbase here in Aviano. Britain has offered RAF Harrier 7s. 4 of those are already thought to be in Italy. The US won't say what it's assigned, but it would probably use F-16s plus Tomahawk land attack missiles launched from its carrier in the Mediterranean. The Canadians are understood to have assigned F-18s, as have the Spanish, 4 of them. Germany is putting 14 Tornado aircraft on standby. The Netherlands and Norway have each promised 8 F-16s. The key question is what those aircraft will hit. Channel 4 News understands that NATO has selected around 100 military installations as its targets, including anti-aircraft missiles, radar units, command centres and barracks. It's possible they might hit the main Serb barracks in the Kosovo capital Pristina here, for instance, and another strike might be on Niš, where the army has been basing itself to launch its forces into Kosovo. But what NATO hits in the rest of Serbia is unclear and will be a key political decision. One potential fly in the ointment is the support of Russia, which has indicated it's against any use of force. And even if the decision to strike is taken, it's still unclear what it can achieve. One diplomat has warned that airstrikes could move Bosnian Serbs to fight alongside their Serb allies, unravelling the entire Dayton peace accord. The Serbs have already achieved what they wanted, effective control of Kosovo, with the Kosovan Liberation Army pushed into the hills and thousands of ethnic Albanian refugees forced out of their homes.
From ITN News at 10 with John Suchet.
Kosovo's agony, Britain sends more fighter jets. Good evening. NATO could be just 72 hours from ordering airstrikes against Serb forces in Kosovo. Britain and America today repeated their ultimatum to the Yugoslav President Slobodan Milosevic to end Serbia's brutal campaign against Kosovo's ethnic Albanian population. Tony Blair accused the Serbs of barbarism, and the RAF is sending 4 more warplanes to a NATO base in southern Italy. Our correspondent Julian Mannion, who's in Kosovo, today saw evidence that Serb forces are still ignoring calls to pull out.
On a hillside near Pristina, men of the Kosovo Liberation Army took us close to the Serbian positions. In this area, the Serbs appear to be defying the UN's pullback demand. Their base is a giant metallurgical factory which dominates the valley.
You see, these bunkers.
Journalists have been fired on trying to approach this place. According to the KLA, the Serbian army's bunkers are still manned and firefights break out every night. The KLA men say that these are some of the positions that NATO should bomb.
What do the Serbs have in this camp? What do they have down there?
They've got everything. They've got heavy machine guns, tanks, Katyusha rockets, big guns, mortars.
In other parts of Kosovo, the Serbs have made a show of withdrawing men from the combat areas. Cameramen were permitted to film a roadblock being dismantled, and the army displayed armoured vehicles and guns, which are now back in their depot after last week's offensive. But the deliberate devastation that the Serbs caused will be seen by some as powerful evidence that decisive action must now be taken. Within sight of the Serbian bunkers, Commander Dino of the KLA took me to see his own house, which was completely destroyed in last week's operation. Hundreds of other homes have been wrecked. Some of the ruins carry the Serbian army's triumphant daubings.
This was not a military offensive in any normal sense of the term, for by the time the Serbs arrived, the KLA had by all accounts already vanished into the hills. Instead, the Serbian army and police simply surrounded village after village and blasted them with tank fire and machine guns. This was not combat, this was punishment.
What NATO governments must now decide is whether airstrikes are a dangerous gamble that may do little to help the population, or whether they are in fact the only way to force the Serbian government to rethink its present brutal policy. Julian Mannion, News at 10, Kosovo. Kosovo.
While there's still talk of a diplomatic solution to the crisis in Kosovo, the signals from officials suggest that is becoming more and more unlikely. The Foreign Office said tonight that both NATO and the UN were operating in what it called a very tight timescale. Here's our diplomatic editor, Robert Moore.
All day, the contact group of 6 nations trying to push forward a settlement on the Kosovo crisis has been meeting here at the Foreign Office. There is enormous exasperation with the actions of the Serbs, and Britain is making clear the time for gimmicks is over and the time for military action may now be very near. Certainly at the UN in New York and in capitals across Europe, the diplomatic temperature is rising sharply. There appears to be a gathering momentum towards NATO using force against Serbia, unless Yugoslav President Slobodan Milosevic backs down this weekend.
I don't think it's very sensible for me to discuss the range of military options and what we might do, but he shouldn't be in any doubt at all, certainly so far as Britain is concerned, that we believe in getting a diplomatic solution to this if we can, but if we can't, we believe in action to prevent a humanitarian disaster and prevent these atrocities and barbarisms.
At the White House, President Clinton has added there can be no delay. The US would lead any airstrike if diplomacy fails.
We have to be very, very strong here. We need to stop the violence, get a negotiated settlement, and work our way through this.
NATO forces are ready. Britain is moving an extra 4 Harrier ground attack aircraft to the region. But there will be clear political costs if any strike is launched. The Russian parliament said it would constitute unlawful aggression by NATO. The UN is giving itself just 48 hours to assess whether Serbian commanders are complying with the demand for an immediate ceasefire and a withdrawal of forces. Amid the violence and the burning of villages, Britain says offering mere gestures to gain time and sow confusion will not be enough to prevent an airstrike. There is also a real awareness that any military action must be well thought out and part of an overall plan. As one senior Foreign Office source said here tonight, there is no point taking punitive action one day and the next having to ask, where is the policy? Robert Moore, News at 10 at the Foreign Office.
The Serbian authorities in Kosovo claimed today their people were the victims of the conflict as Washington stepped up its threat of airstrikes. Serbian police showed journalists evidence of what they claimed was a massacre of Serbian civilians carried out by Kosovo Liberation fighters. Our correspondent Julian Mannion is in Kosovo and he was taken to the site.
The Serbian propaganda machine has swung into action, trying to prove that their side has innocent victims too. Officials took a convoy of journalists deep into the Kosovan countryside to what they say is a massacre site that they're investigating. The journey took us to an army camp, one of the places that the UN wants Serbian troops to withdraw from. Nearby, in an area that was until recently under KLA control, Serbian soldiers stood guard over a rocky gully. At the entrance, bones signalled what was to be found inside. Further down, 2 human skulls, one smashed by a bullet. Serbian officials say more remains are buried here and suggest that the victims were Serbs.
Quite close to this area, there have been several Serbian houses which have been completely destroyed several months ago, and those residents of those houses are missing.
Do you acknowledge that Serbian forces have themselves carried out massacres of ethnic Albanian civilians?
Sorry, that's not a question for me.
Do you acknowledge that such massacres have taken place?
I haven't seen it, so I cannot.
The human remains at the bottom of this gully have become a weapon in the propaganda war. The Serbs are presenting them as likely victims of the KLA. The Albanians will almost certainly deny it. In fact, all that has been proved here today is the kind of effort that the Serbian authorities are now prepared to make to try to stave off NATO airstrikes. Julian Mannion, ITN, Kosovo. The Serbs have pulled out some troops and tanks, but Kosovo remains under an iron grip. This is the main highway through the centre of the province, and all along it are smashed, abandoned villages and the checkpoints and firing positions of the Serb paramilitary police.
Convoys of troops and police still move along the deserted highway. For the moment, there is no gunfire, but nor is it the ceasefire that the UN has demanded. The Serbs have created a wasteland and are trying to call it peace. It's the tragedy of the refugees that is now concentrating the minds of Western leaders. 5 miles from the highway, we found 3,000 of them sheltering under plastic sheets. For now they're surviving, but no one here knows what will happen when winter starts to bite. Among the refugees, I found one of Kosovo's best-known journalists, whose home was destroyed by the Serbian army. He told me that the people here want to go back and rebuild their houses, but were fired on when they tried to return.
The coming week may well be decisive for Kosovo. Western governments, including Britain, will have to decide if the sinister calm that now prevails here means that the Serbs are finally ready to negotiate, or if airstrikes are the only way to force a settlement. Julian Mannion, ITN, Kosovo.
As the prospect of NATO intervention in the province looms closer, hundreds of people this afternoon marched across London demanding immediate action. They want the Serbian leader, Slobodan Milosevic, brought to justice.
Milosevic is a war criminal!
A sustained assault on the ethnic Albanians has driven an estimated 1/3 people from their homes and left 800 dead.
Kosovo is only an hour and a half away from where we are right now. It's in the heart of Europe. What are the European leaders doing, and why are they allowing war crimes, crimes against humanity and violations of the Geneva Convention to take place there?
If a report tomorrow fails to persuade the UN that the Serb assaults are being halted, airstrikes could be launched within days. Philippa Young, ITN, Central London.
Quite deliberately, in words and on the ground in military preparations, NATO has today increased the pressure on the Yugoslav President Slobodan Milosevic. 4 more RAF ground attack Harriers have been flown to Italy to join the gathering NATO force poised to launch air raids on Serb targets. NATO commanders have said such missions could now be flown within hours of a political decision being reached. America's top diplomatic troubleshooter for the region, the envoy Richard Holbrooke, was at NATO this morning with a clear message.
We hope to make clear to President Milosevic and to the people of Yugoslavia the extreme gravity of the situation. Here at NATO, the planning for military action is serious, intense, and sustained.
Certainly some Serb troops and armour have returned to their barracks, as the UN has demanded, but it is far from clear whether this will be enough to prevent the NATO airstrikes. More difficult for the alliance is that European foreign ministers meeting today appear to be divided on the need for imminent military action. Many are hoping that diplomacy alone will force the Serbs to back down. But at Downing Street, where key ministers and the Chief of the Defence Staff brief the Prime Minister, the intention is not just to maintain, but to steadily increase the pressure on Slobodan Milosevic. Robert Moore, News at 10.
First light at RAF Larbruck in Germany, and 4 Harrier jump jets are towed from their hangars. They are the latest warplanes to join NATO's strike force. Their pilots are men who will be in the front line if airstrikes are launched against the Serbs. So normally routine pre-flight checks acquire extra importance. This is an operation which could be for real.
Are you apprehensive about going out there? A little bit, and let's see how it goes. Okay, cool.
The deployment of these aircraft to a base in southern Italy doubles the British contingent of the force that NATO has assembled and is now ready to strike at targets in Serbia and Kosovo if and when the political decision is made. And that decision could be made within the next 48 hours. These aircraft are fitted with the very latest laser-guided bombing technology, which they can use day or night.
We can pick out those targets, we can designate them very accurately indeed, and we can drop weapons on them which will clinically and surgically destroy them should that be required.
8 ground attack Harriers are tonight ready to go from their Italian base. They and the rest of the NATO strike force now await only a political decision to take robust military action against President Milosevic. Kevin Dunn, ITN, Orient Barber.
The American envoy Richard Holbrooke has been laying down the law to the Serbian president Slobodan Milosevic again tonight over the crisis in Kosovo. He's demanding a pullout by Serb forces and insisting that the threat of NATO airstrikes is real and not a game. Mr. Holbrooke himself went to Kosovo earlier today. ITN's Julian Mannion reports from there.
Tonight, some sign that the Serbs are responding to the massive pressure that they're under. About 1,000 men from armed police units regrouped near Pristina and pulled out. These are some of the men who have been guarding and frequently terrorizing the Kosovo countryside. And for the last 24 hours, the US envoy Richard Holbrooke has been demanding that all of them be withdrawn. The question now is whether that demand is really being met.
This convoy is now well on its way out of Kosovo. It's a pullback that's clearly timed to help President Milosevic in his last-ditch talks with Richard Holbrooke. But it's still not clear just how complete the withdrawal will be. And if it's not complete, whether NATO will accept it.
Today, Holbrooke flew to Pristina for an on-the-spot assessment of the situation. He described the condition of the province as grim and stressed NATO's readiness and the firm line he's taking with the Serbian leader.
This is serious stuff. We are not playing poker here. We're not playing chicken. We're trying to make clear the extreme seriousness of the situation.
Underlining that, the British Embassy in Belgrade has announced that all non-essential staff are being pulled out. But it's for the thousands of refugees that the clock is really ticking. As winter nears, large numbers are still on the move, driven by their fear of the Serbian forces. One group abandoned their vehicles, which were then burned by the Serbs. Others are sheltering where they can, waiting to hear if Western governments will really do anything to help them. Julian Mannion, News at 10, Kosovo.
The Albanians of Kosovo, more than 90% of the Serbian province's population, can't wait for NATO intervention. Huge numbers of them have been driven from their homes, many massacred. But the minority Serbs also suffered at the hands of the separatist Kosovar Liberation Army before the Serbs cracked down. Our correspondent Julian Mannion has been to the Serb village of Preluja, 20 miles from Pristina, to hear their side of the conflict.
In the deadly fields of Kosovo, armed men look for any sign of their enemies. These men are Serbs, part of the small Serbian minority in the largely Albanian province. For the last 6 months, they have been engaged in a savage vendetta with their neighbours. For Vlad Ivanovic, this expedition into Albanian territory is a chance to revisit his home. He was forced to abandon it when the KLA took over in this area, and today the house is wrecked. Safely back in their fortified enclave, the village of Preluja, the Serbs gulp down the fiery local spirit. Within sight are Albanian villages destroyed by the Serbian army. Many of the Albanians are now refugees, but the Serbs have no sympathy. Instead, they are angered by continued sniper fire from the KLA.
The Albanians frequently attack us. These fields are ours, but we can't work them.
The Serbian reapers carry automatic rifles along with their scythes. Last night, this farmer was shot by an Albanian who ambushed him in the corn. In Charlie's Cafe, Preluja's self-styled defense minister remains confident. He claims not even to be worried by the possibility of NATO airstrikes on the Serbs.
No, absolutely not. There's no reason to be afraid. We Serbs are still a force to be reckoned with.
Near Preluja is Serbia's national symbol, the monument that marks the battlefield of Kosovo, where 600 years ago the Serbs lost their independence and came under the yoke of the Turkish Empire. It marked them forever.
For the Serbs of Kosovo, their history is written in blood and suffering. These are not people to shed tears over the fate of Albanian refugees, nor perhaps are they people to back down in the face of foreign pressure. As the threat of NATO airstrikes grows, the countdown will be tense. Julian Mannion, News at 10 at the village of Preluja in Kosovo.
The United Nations Refugee Agency, the UNHCR, and some leading charities ordered their people out of Kosovo today because of the danger of NATO intervention and a wider conflict. That will mean even more hardship, in the short term at least, for the province's majority Albanian population. As ITN's Julian Mannion reports now from Kosovo.
This morning, a UN aid convoy headed out into the Kosovo countryside. With 150 tons of refugee supplies, it was the biggest convoy that UNHCR has organised. It may well be their last for some time. The operation showed all the signs of hasty planning against the background of mounting tension between Serbia and the West. The supplies were taken only a short distance out of Pristina to a small town where the UN lorries choked the streets. The town does not have a major refugee problem, but it's hoped that the supplies can be redistributed from there. Are you saying that the threat of NATO bombing is actually making it more difficult at the moment for you to do your job?
Of course, it's making it more difficult as we are, of course, taking the security into account, and we have to look into the possibility or to the risk.
Shortly afterwards, it was announced that staff of the UN Refugee Agency are being evacuated because of the crisis. Workers from several Western charities, including Oxfam, are also leaving. It's a move that will leave thousands of Albanians in a still more perilous situation. Tons of supplies have got through to the refugees, but there are still many who are in terrible need. In this field, we've found 90 people who've been living rough ever since the Serbian army burnt their village 8 weeks ago. Today they're cold, many of them are sick, and they're desperate. These refugees have had no contact with any relief organisation for the last 3 weeks.
We're suffering in every way. There's not enough to eat or drink, and I can't sleep.
Nearby, other refugees are sheltering in a half-built house. Inside, 35-year-old Hula Radzi is desperately ill. In the same filthy room, her 5 children are clustered around her. For this family, a final decision on NATO airstrikes or a climb down by President Milosevic may well come too late. Julian Mannion, News at 10, Kosovo. Once again, Richard Holbrooke came to Pristina as the strategy of pressure began to look more like shuttle diplomacy. With the British ambassador, he met the moderate Albanian leader Ibrahim Rugova to discuss a plan that would give ethnic Albanians some sort of autonomy, but not yet full independence. On his talks with President Milosevic, Holbrooke was grim.
So where are we? Well, we're where we were earlier today, we're where we were yesterday. Extremely serious situation.
As the talks went on, we were taken to a secret KLA base just over a mile from the Serb positions. There we saw men of the KLA's Black Tiger Commando unit. They say they are currently observing a limited ceasefire, apparently for the period in which NATO airstrikes may take place.
What are you actually fighting for? What do you want?
Everybody knows.
What?
We want independence.
These fighters would not discuss the Holbrooke peace plan, but one of their top leaders did.
While we were filming with the KLA, we met one of their most senior commanders, a man known only as Number 10, who would not permit us to take any pictures of him whatsoever. He told me in the clearest possible terms that the Holbrooke peace plan, based on some sort of compromise over autonomy, was of no interest to them whatsoever. The KLA, he said, will accept nothing short of full independence. It's clear that Richard Holbrooke has a lot of work to do to get a settlement. Julian Mannion, ITN, Kosovo.
American B-52 bombers are tonight standing by in Britain as part of the massive NATO strike force threatening Yugoslavia. The planes, armed with cruise missiles, flew into Gloucestershire today. It was another warning to President Slobodan Milosevic, who's still locked in talks with the American envoy Richard Holbrooke. Tomorrow, NATO is likely to authorise airstrikes, as the Prime Minister Tony Blair holds an emergency cabinet meeting on Kosovo. Terry Lloyd reports.
The giant B-52 bombers, each carrying 8 cruise missiles, swooped into RAF Fairford, where they will remain on standby, awaiting orders from NATO command. The long-range combat aircraft, which were used for carpet bombing in Vietnam and precision strikes against troops and fixed targets in the Gulf War, were described as ready and able for their next mission.
I think the B-52s will be a very big player in anything that we undertake, that NATO decides to do. I think just by the virtue of being here, we send a very powerful signal that NATO means business.
The arrival of the B-52s has been carefully orchestrated, designed to remind President Milosevic that these bombers could soon be over Serbia, in the hope that he finally backs down. A total of 260 American aircraft are on standby for any military strike, including the 6 B-52s at RAF Fairford. A carrier group is based in the Adriatic. In Italy, there are 10 A-10 tank busters at Aviano and 8 British GR-7s at Gioia del Colle Air Base. And American B-2s will fly over from Missouri.
And as the military preparations build up, the humanitarian crisis continues to grow in Kosovo. The lives of thousands more refugees are in danger, as our correspondent Julian Mannion reports from the province.
But in the ravaged countryside around the police encampments, the refugees tell a different story. I was taken to a clearing in the woods where about 100 people have been hiding ever since their village was attacked. Here they are only a short distance from 3 different army and police positions. They say that the Serbs open fire every night. This man told me what happened when he tried to sneak back home to feed his chickens.
The Serbs saw me and started to shoot. The bullets flew all around me and I had to run away.
And refugees are dying out in the open. This woman died last night of a heart attack after weeks of sleeping on the muddy ground.
President Milosevic is claiming that the situation in Kosovo is gradually calming down. But for these people, every night brings fresh terror. They are the evidence that the Serb forces are still preventing many of the refugees from returning to their smashed villages. And without that return, there can be little hope of peace. Julian Mannion, ITN, Kosovo.
Good evening. A deal to resolve the Kosovo crisis and lift the threat of NATO airstrikes on Serbia appeared to be in the air tonight. The American envoy, Richard Holbrooke, who flew back from Belgrade to report to NATO, hasn't released any details. But according to the Russian defense minister, President Milosevic has now agreed, as part of a deal, to allow a 1,500-strong international observer force into Kosovo. His 11th-hour concessions just might be enough, though Britain said tonight it wasn't over yet and that NATO had to maintain its resolve. Our diplomatic editor, Robert Moore, has the latest.
Tonight, the American envoy Richard Holbrooke, after an emotionally charged and exhausting day of talks, has moved from Belgrade to Brussels. He is now in the process of briefing top NATO officials. If a deal is reached in the next 24 hours, the West will give credit to the formidable military build-up that has put so much pressure on Mr. Milosevic. Some 400 combat aircraft, as well as many warships, are poised to strike at Serb targets. NATO is still likely to issue what they call a final activation order, meaning that authority over launching an attack will move from NATO governments to a single supreme commander. But it would appear this strike force will be held in reserve in case the Serbs renege on any agreement. And tonight, amid the fast-moving diplomatic developments, the shape of a Kosovo deal does seem to be emerging. It appears the Serbs would agree to a ceasefire, a withdrawal of their security forces, and eventually a political dialogue with the ethnic Albanian majority that would lead to renewed autonomy for Kosovo. But potential problems remain. Would Milosevic, a man trusted so little, stick to any deal? How would the West verify that he does keep his promises? And what powers would the likely force of international monitors have in Kosovo? Tonight there is talk of some 1,500 observers being deployed. Today the Serbs have shown to the cameras that police units are pulling out of the province. It may be propaganda, and the West will now be insisting that a very intrusive verification regime is put in place to ensure that the security forces do not simply return when this crisis recedes. The Chief of the Defence Staff, General Sir Charles Guthrie, briefed the Prime Minister in Downing Street this afternoon, outlining the military options if diplomacy fails. Tonight in London there are undoubtedly growing hopes that the Serbs are backing down. But the government is also quick to point out this evening that any talk of victory is premature and that the only language Mr. Milosevic understands is the threat of force. Robert Moore, News at 10, Downing Street.
The people of Belgrade, the Serbian capital, were today resigned to NATO attacks and preparing for the worst. Foreign embassy staff, including the British, left town. But then came news of the possible deal. Reporting from Belgrade, here's our Europe correspondent, Bill Neely.
There is relief in Belgrade tonight that diplomacy is being given another chance. But the city isn't dropping its guard. One government minister telling me today, we are still preparing for war. A crisis evident at Britain's embassy today, where the Union flag was taken down and the building evacuated. 10 diplomats left, the doors locked behind them. Only Britain's ambassador will stay on.
We're still thinking positively, but we have to plan prudently against all eventualities, and this seemed the sensible thing to do in the circumstances.
Serbs are worried that the world's most powerful military alliance is lining up against them. President Milosevic's government says it's ready for a military strike.
We're actually preparing for war because those threats are very serious.
Serbs are being urged to give blood at transfusion centres. And underground, we found new signs today directing people to bomb shelters. The shelters, though, remain firmly locked. Tonight, this opposition radio station is still broadcasting, but these independent journalists are preparing to hand it over to the government. If NATO attacks, President Milosevic will close it down. Last year, this man led tens of thousands in a protest aimed at toppling Mr. Milosevic. Today, amid a wave of nationalism, he told me NATO's threats are criminal. He's standing by his president.
In spite of aggression, we will defend our country.
Tomorrow, the talking will begin again in this city when Mr. Holbrooke returns. A city which tonight is convinced that a deal sparing them from airstrikes is close. Bill Neely, News at 10, Belgrade.
It's the majority Albanian population of Kosovo on whose behalf NATO has been threatening to intervene. Huge numbers of them have had their homes and villages destroyed and are living in the open, vulnerable not only to their Serb enemies but to starvation and disease. As ITN's Julian Mannion reports from Kosovo, their needs are becoming more urgent by the day.
This is how the refugees are surviving in the forest as nighttime temperatures fall towards zero. At dusk, they cluster round a fire to try to warm the bones. Then tea inside the makeshift shelters built of branches, plastic sheets and leaves. These are the people who are now praying that NATO and the West do something, anything, to help them.
The Serbs burned our houses and our food. If we had even bread and salt to eat, it would be enough. But sometimes we don't even have that.
Sleep is difficult as the chill silence is broken by bursts of rifle fire. In daylight, I was taken round the camp by Fernando Del Mundo, one of a small group of UN staff who stayed on in Kosovo after last week's pullout.
Time is running out. We need to deliver food before winter sets in. And in the last few days, it's been very difficult because a number of aid workers have left.
The cold is driving many refugees back out of the forests. Sometimes, if the Serb police have gone, they try to repair their wrecked homes. Many more are squatting in any shelter they can find, often far from their own villages. With most Western relief workers evacuated, the burden of helping the refugees is being carried by the Mother Teresa charity, which has volunteer workers throughout Kosovo. This branch is distributing UN relief supplies to some 85,000 refugees. They say that they are getting no help whatsoever from any Serb or Yugoslav organization.
The countryside of Kosovo is now eerily quiet. It's as if everyone, refugees, Kosovo Liberation Army men, Serbian police, are all holding their breath, waiting to see if NATO will really carry out its airstrikes. Everyone knows that this week will be decisive for the future of the province and for the people who live in it. Julian Mannion, News at 10, Kosovo.
Good evening. NATO issued a tough new warning to Serbia today. Honor the Kosovo peace deal or face military action. The immediate threat of NATO airstrikes was put on hold for 4 days to give President Milosevic time to comply. But President Clinton and Tony Blair both insisted today that they would use force if he went back on his word. In the deal forced through by the American envoy Richard Holbrooke, the Serbs agreed to pull their forces out and allow 2,000 unarmed foreign monitors in. Our Europe correspondent Bill Neely reports from the Yugoslav capital, Belgrade.
After 9 days of heated talks, Richard Holbrooke announces a deal with the Serbs. The world's strongest military alliance pulling back from the brink of attacking Belgrade, President Milosevic agreeing to pull troops out of Kosovo. Do you regard this as a triumph for NATO?
It's compliance that matters. But if this is the road path to the end of the emergency, and I hope it is, and then we will feel we earned our pay this week.
Mr. Holbrooke says that until President Milosevic does what he says he'll do, the threat of airstrikes will remain. And this is what they've agreed to. The withdrawal of thousands of Serbian troops and special police from Kosovo, the arrival of 2,000 unarmed international observers to check that Serbia obeys UN demands, the start of talks with ethnic Albanians leading to autonomy for Kosovo, and the return of all refugees, more than 250,000, to their homes. Western leaders say the refugees have suffered too much.
We're certainly looking at an operation that is going to keep President Milosevic from going back to the barbarism he engaged in before. We must make sure that we deal with the humanitarian catastrophe. We've come this far, frankly, only because we were prepared to use force.
Mr. Holbrooke said there was no deadline for Serbian forces' withdrawal. The civilians replacing them will have no weapons to protect Kosovan villagers. On the streets of Belgrade, relief that bombing is now unlikely. Many told me our president has won.
He is very, very strong today, stronger than last month.
He is very strong today. He's very wise man.
But opposition leaders say Britain, the US and the rest should watch Milosevic like a hawk. Do you trust President Milosevic?
Nobody in his right mind trusts Milosevic. That's a matter of fact.
President Clinton says Balkan graveyards are filled with Mr. Milosevic's broken promises. The guns of NATO will remain loaded, while the promises of this deal are tested in Kosovo. Bill Neely, News at 10, Belgrade.
The deal threshed out in Belgrade has done little to lift the misery of the thousands of Albanian refugees forced to flee their homes in Kosovo itself. They still suspect and fear the Serbs. Our correspondent Julian Manning's been back to the hills around Pristina, where he found the desperate people too scared to return home.
Winter misery has hit the refugees of Kosovo. As Richard Holbrooke and President Milosevic reached a fragile agreement, refugees were trying to shelter from driving rain in a tented camp west of Pristina. These people have had no relief supplies for 3 weeks. They are short of food and warm clothing. Sandals are the only shoes that many of the children possess. The people here want to believe that today's deal will help them return to their village. But for the moment, fear remains the key.
Conditions here are about as miserable as they could be. The rain's continuous, it's freezing cold, and the earth beneath the tents is turning into mud. Yet in spite of President Milosevic's promises, the people here show no sign of returning to their homes. The truth is that they simply don't believe him.
A 2-year-old boy called Midjan is ill because of the conditions, but his mother still doesn't want to take the chance of trying to go home.
We've tried to go home 3 or 4 times, but the Serbs fired at us. I was forced to bring the children back here.
Their village, Kishna Reka, is only a couple of miles from the mountainside where the refugees are hiding. Among the wreckage, some villagers are now trying to repair their homes. Lulzim Chelai counts himself lucky that a house he was building before the war survived intact. He now spends daylight hours trying to make it habitable, but returns every night to his family in the refugee camp. He's hoping that President Milosevic will honor today's deal.
I don't trust Milosevic, but I think that this time he will be forced to keep his word.
There are refugees all over the 4,500 square miles of Kosovo. Today's agreement is supposed to get them home, but the simple truth is that an enormous barrier of hate and fear will have to be broken before that can even start to happen. Julian Mannion, News at 10, Kosovo.
Britain is to provide up to 200 of the 2,000 unarmed monitors in Kosovo. The Foreign Secretary, Robin Cook, said today they'd be people of caliber. An advance party should leave tomorrow. The monitors will make sure that President Milosevic keeps his word and ends the crackdown on the ethnic Albanian majority. So far, the Serbs appear to have made no move to relax their grip, as ITN's Julian Mannion found out in Kosovo today.
In our armoured Land Rover, we set out to see if Serb forces really have withdrawn from one of the most strategic areas of Kosovo. The highway between Pristina and Peć has been the scene of some of the most brutal Serbian operations. 25,000 Albanians used to live here, all of them are gone. The few cars on the road are mostly carrying Serb police. Many buildings have been turned into police strongpoints. This one spotted us as soon as we tried to start filming outside the car. While we were taking these pictures, we were stopped by 3 Serb policemen who smelt of alcohol. They told us that if they caught us filming again, we would pay for it. We turned off to the town of Belaćevac, still guarded by Serb armor. Today, policemen are the only inhabitants in what used to be a town of 20,000 people.
Before coming here, we asked the Serbian authorities if we could film this part of our report in front of the fortified police station at the center of Belaćevac down there. Permission was flatly refused. But what can be said on the basis of our journey is that the Serbian paramilitary police have not withdrawn from any of the ruined villages in this area, and that as things stand, there is very little chance of the refugees returning home. Near a Serb checkpoint, we found a team from the UN Relief Agency, deeply concerned by the numbers of police still active.
Yes, they're still very much in evidence, and for as long as they're there, I don't expect people to go back.
A lot of hope is now being pinned on 2,000 unarmed OSCE observers. How are they supposed to get the Serb police out of these villages and the refugees back in?
Good question, I don't know.
The UN has now delivered emergency supplies for some of the refugees hiding near the Pristina-Peć highway. But with the Serb police holding their positions and the refugees still in fear of them, no one knows when this ordeal will end. Julian Mannion, News at 10, Kosovo.
It was just after midnight when Special Forces police entered the newspaper offices. They came with an order to close down the Daily Telegraph because its coverage of Kosovo breached a new censorship decree. What appeared to be plainclothes police were already there. Foreign journalists were not welcome observers. An hour later, the Telegraph reporters came out brandishing their previous day's headline, NATO permits airstrikes.
This is a fact. It happened yesterday, the day before. And only crime we done was we printed the fact.
What did the police say when they came into your office?
You have to go out immediately or we shall use the force. And they used the force. They didn't beat us, they pushed us on.
It was the same story at Danas today, where the police raided earlier in the evening. But here, the journalists managed to hold out through the night.
It's quite illegal. I mean, it's just a piece of paper.
So you're just going to carry on?
We are going to carry on, yeah, definitely, as long as we can.
Their crime under the new decree was to reprint articles from foreign newspapers and to spread fear, panic and defeatism. Newspapers were printed through the night, but in the early hours, today's editions of both papers were seized. And another paper has been warned it may be raided tonight. Beyond Belgrade's liberal intellectual circles, few are worried. Rural Serbs rely on state television and radio, which tells them that everything President Milosevic does is right, and those who criticize are traitors.
I don't usually buy a newspaper. I see there are lots of newspapers in a shop, but I didn't notice which ones were there today.
There are some things which should not be published in a newspaper. It's obvious, it's just gossip.
Many here might hope that the agreement over Kosovo would be the first step towards Serbia being accepted once again into the international community, to no longer being a pariah. But the closing down of the newspapers today shows how far from that this government is. If it can't accept freedom of speech and democratic norms here in Serbia proper, what chance is there of a viable political process in Kosovo?
Listening to the Foreign Secretary yesterday, one got the impression the issue of full powers for the Hague Tribunal was all settled.
Now, in terms of the War Crimes Tribunal, you are absolutely right. There is a commitment to that in the Security Council resolution. The agreement that President Milosevic has given includes full compliance with the Security Council resolution and therefore must involve full compliance with those references to the War Crimes Tribunal. The Yugoslav authorities have said that they are willing to let the War Crimes Tribunal immediately double its size here and go higher if necessary. They can move around the area. They will not formally accept jurisdiction in Kosovo, but they can go into the area.
I confronted the Foreign Secretary this afternoon in London with an apparent contradiction.
Foreign Secretary, in an article this morning you said that President Milosevic had promised full cooperation with the International War Crimes Tribunal, but in fact isn't it the case that the Yugoslavs won't accept the jurisdiction of the Hague Tribunal in Kosovo at all?
First of all, President Milosevic has agreed explicitly, clearly and in terms in his agreement to full compliance with the UN Security Council resolution, and one of those paragraphs in that resolution requires him to cooperate with the War Crimes Tribunal. Also, I do have to say it is not for Belgrade to decide where the jurisdiction of the War Crimes Tribunal extends. That's a matter for the tribunal, and the prosecutor has made it quite clear that she regards that she does have jurisdiction in Kosovo. One last question from the lady there.
And that was that. The sad truth is that the Hague Tribunal's wishes have in the past been totally ignored by the Serbian leader. When the Yugoslav civil war began, 200 patients at Vukovar hospital were massacred. The War Crimes Tribunal has indicted 3 soldiers who were in command, including the man on the left, Colonel Veselin Slivančanin. Not only has he not been arrested, he's living openly in Belgrade, and according to our latest information, he's earning a comfortable income as a lecturer at a military academy.
The brinkmanship in the Balkans continued today. President Milosevic of Yugoslavia had been given until tomorrow to get all his Serbian troops out of Kosovo or risk NATO intervention. But the evidence seems to be that the Serbs are staying put. To give them another chance to comply, NATO today extended their deadline by 10 days. From Kosovo, ITN's Julian Mannion reports.
The pullback of Serb forces from Kosovo is going at a snail's pace. These are engineering troops going home. A number of combat units, including armour, are still in place. Proof comes courtesy of their enemies, the Kosovo Liberation Army, anxious to demonstrate that the Serbs are defying NATO. From a ridge under their control, they show journalists the Serb army positions in the village of Likovac. Visible across the valley is a Serb tank beside a building, its gun pointed towards the camera. Other tanks and trucks move in convoy inside the Serbian zone of control. Further down the hillside is a mortar position with a mechanical digger nearby. US envoy Christopher Hill has once again urged President Milosevic to pull his troops out.
We have insisted, and we continue to insist, that we're not looking for gestures, we're not looking for initial compliance, we're looking for full compliance.
The problem now facing President Milosevic is one of his own making. Serb nationalism over Kosovo, represented by this monument, is something he exploited in order to come to power. If he now finally bows to NATO's demand for a full troop pullback, he will be betraying the very forces that created him. Julian Mannion, News at 10, Kosovo.
The UN demanded it 3 weeks ago. NATO was poised to bomb for it. Today it finally happened. The Serbian army pulls out of Kosovo. The US says the withdrawals are substantial, but still not sufficient. In the early hours, tanks and heavy weapons left in the first major army pullout. NATO is now giving the Serbs another 10 days to withdraw 10,000 troops and police. Troops out, monitors in. Today, the first dozen arriving to prepare the way for 2,000 who'll be unarmed and vulnerable.
Obviously, it's in a hostile, potentially hostile environment, but the situation must be benign. We will not confront. We're not in a position to confront anyone on the military sense, and if required, if there are hostilities, we will simply withdraw.
An American U-2 spy plane, rarely seen, took off from Italy today and is now flying over Kosovo. It's not the end of the crisis. Only half the troops have gone. There are still isolated gunfights. And now 2,000 monitors will add to this volatile mix. Bill Neely, ITN, Belgrade. It looks like a war zone, and it sounds like one. Serbian tanks on the move today, shelling and gunfire tonight, just days after a deal designed to bring peace. We saw dozens of heavily equipped Serbian police move close to the village where 3 policemen were killed over the weekend. 2 of them were buried today. The Serbs say they were ambushed in their guard post by Albanian militants. The killings have raised tensions. A battalion of tanks, artillery and troops now hunting their killers. Overnight shelling by Serb police near a village this morning brought a new wave of refugees to a ravine filled with nearly 3,000 people. It was, these women told me, the worst shelling in months. The children were screaming, everyone was terrified, so they ran. 30 arrived today, more than 200 fled over the weekend. New plastic sheeting prepared today for the next influx. The Serb police were supposed to withdraw, says this man. Here, it's worse than ever. Nearby, the armed militants the police are hunting watch the tanks move. They say the police are provoking them. They won't lay down their weapons. Into all this today stepped 24 multinational unarmed monitors.
What is happening in Kosovo?
They have a lot of catching up to do. Here to monitor a withdrawal, and a peace they could see today is far from complete. If this camp is typical, it will take a lot more than a spy plane overhead and unarmed monitors on the ground to persuade tens of thousands of refugees that it's safe to return to their homes. These people, at least, have no faith in the deal done with President Milosevic. The casualties continue to mount up. NATO's threats remain. The Serbs say NATO are still not withdrawing quickly enough. With more shelling tonight, Kosovo's crisis is still very much alive. Bill Neely, News at 10, Pristina.
Good evening. ITN has first-hand evidence tonight of the Serbian bombardment of still forcing ethnic Albanians in Kosovo from their homes. About 50 were forced to flee a mountain village near the provincial capital Pristina today after it came under shell fire. They said it was too dangerous to stay and they were better off in the forest. Today, as our Europe correspondent Bill Neely and an ITN camera crew were in the village, Terpeze, they too came under fire. Here's Bill Neely's report.
There is in Kosovo a ceasefire agreement, but there is no ceasefire. Gunfire and shelling breaking the peace the outside world thought had been won. These artillery shells fired from known Serbian positions. The chief target, the village of Terpeze, as we were about to find out. In a farm in the village, they showed me where one shell had landed, and more than a mile away, the Serb police position where they said the shells were fired from. Down below, there was evidence of damaged homes. A farmer showed me shell fragments he'd found. Hardly anyone was left here, he said, in a village where more than 1,000 lived before. Suddenly, we were the targets. The first shell landing about 100 yards from me, a funnel of earth flying through the air. Seconds later, another thud. We ran for cover. We knew another shell was coming. We didn't know where it would land. It was even closer, and soon there was another.
It's all right.
We've now heard about 5 mortar rounds fired in the last 10 minutes or so. It's now 3:15 in the afternoon, and this is earlier than mortars have been fired here before, and they're certainly firing at us. There's another one now.
We have to go there.
We escaped on foot. The farmer told us 2 shells landed exactly where we'd been talking to him. His home was destroyed. In a nearby forest, a 2-month-old baby, now a refugee from the same village. More than 100 people fled overnight, terrified by the shelling. Among these children, half a dozen from Terpeze who left yesterday after they were shelled. The poem he's reading says, "We live in Kosovo and we will die in Kosovo." But the Kosovo peace deal was meant to ensure villagers could live in peace and refugees could return home. Not here, not today. Nearby, Serb police units were reinforcing their positions today, not pulling out. Here, overlooking the scattered villages that have been targeted for 3 days now. The Serb media center told ITN no such unit could have shelled Terpeze. There is fear and there are tears and there is no peace here. 8 months into Kosovo's crisis, 1 week after Kosovo's peace deal. Bill Neely, News at 10, Terpeze. It was the massacre that triggered the latest crisis, one of Kosovo's worst atrocities, and today the death toll rose. We were taken to a well where this morning, say villagers, they found the mutilated body of a man. They said he was killed when Serb forces attacked the village with guns and knives. Only when they pulled him out could they identify him, and that was difficult. Rezallë was killed not in crossfire or by shelling, but at close range. They took him back to his farm and to his brother, who had managed to escape the massacre. There are now 21 graves here, 9 from one family, from one massacre 3 weeks ago. But the violence continues today. As this has been happening, we've been hearing the sound for an hour now of distant shelling. The militant group, the KLA, who the Serbs are hunting, told me they won't lay down their weapons. Talk to the Serbs about a ceasefire, he says. They're ceasing nothing. The deadline for withdrawal is real, but perhaps not as real as this massacre from which all this began. She was 12 years old and she was doing what the world is encouraging refugees here to do. She was trying to return home. This morning, Serbian soldiers shot her. This woman saw her son and her two grandsons, aged 2 and 6, also shot dead. They crossed the mountains and were killed 3 miles inside Kosovo, this man told me. But it is a route also used by guerrillas to smuggle weapons. They decided to return home only after they heard about the international agreement.
That agreement between Milosevic and Holbrooke has destroyed us. That 10-day deadline has brought us to this, a land full of fresh graves. This young girl, she is the result of the agreement with Milosevic.
In these small villages, news of a shooting like this spreads quickly and breeds fear. It is highly unlikely that any more refugees would dare to return here.
We are seeking to get the compliance. We don't have it yet, and certainly this will be conveyed to people in NATO and elsewhere.
The agreement may convince even fewer refugees tonight as the news breaks of 12-year-old Leonora and her last journey home. Bill Neely, News at 10, Dziercina.
Good evening. The pullout of Serb forces from Kosovo, demanded by NATO, appears to have begun tonight. Large numbers of troops and tanks have been on the move. They've got until 7 o'clock tomorrow night to withdraw or face the threat of NATO airstrikes. But it's still not clear how many troops are involved or how far they're going. And there are fears they may just be doing enough to avoid attack. Our Europe correspondent Bill Neely reports from Kosovo.
After 8 months of violence, after 2,000 deaths, Serbian forces today pulled back but did not pull out of Kosovo. Tanks and hundreds of troops withdrawing on the very eve of yet another deadline. Serbia's President Milosevic calculating that this will be enough to avoid a military showdown. These troops are clearly heading away from the main area of conflict, but for how long? Their president has said before they can be back here in a day. The troops in fact returned to barracks in the province's capital, Pristina, just 25 miles away. Early afternoon and down from the hills, Serbian special police. Their commander telling me that they too had orders to leave. Many of these men are the hardened core who shelled and murdered and looted their way across a province that utterly rejects them. From here, the Serb police could have controlled access to the village beyond and could, if necessary, have shelled that village and burned the houses. Today, the police burned their own command posts and bunkers as they withdrew. All of it watched by international monitors.
It's a very good picture. I'm very pleased to see this kind of withdrawal of Serbian and VJ security forces from the countryside.
Checkpoint after checkpoint was demolished. The people who'd been intimidated and terrified by them couldn't believe it was happening. In their forest camp, badly flooded today, 2,000 refugees remain. How can that be, he says, and even if it is true, we're not returning home. His baby is badly undernourished. The rain is reducing the camp to a sea of mud. The withdrawal of Serbian forces may come just in time for the old and for the sick. But for this young boy, it's too late. Shot dead by a Serbian policeman just before today's withdrawal. And this is what the Serbian forces have left behind: devastated villages. This is what people used to call home, and to where they are being encouraged to return. Tonight, the pullback continues. NATO will decide tomorrow if it's enough. The people of Kosovo have had quite enough of Serbia's armed forces. Bill Neely, News at 10, Belaćevac.
At dawn, 3,000 people get ready for another day in the open. It's basic survival, but fear keeps them here and keeps this war going. For Alifa Nuhai and her son, that means a daily trek to their family's small holding in Kishnareka, leaving the relative safety of the camp. On the way, she showed me the graves of 3 people killed in the latest attack on the village last August. Her home in the middle of Kishnareka miraculously escaped the worst of the shelling, but inside it had been raided. Her valuables stolen and all but a few pieces of furniture destroyed. When you look at the damage that's been done to houses and the rest of the village, you can understand the people's fear. No one here trusts Milosevic, and they're now looking to assurances from the West that if he does go back on his word again, they'll be protected, if necessary, by NATO's force. In the nearby village of Krakova lies the body of an 11-year-old boy. He was killed by Serb snipers while collecting wood with his father. This is a village where people have come back to their homes, and the family asked an international monitor what he's doing to protect them. As the coffin is brought past, they invite him to come to the funeral. He says he can't, as it wouldn't be safe. You think the Serbs would shoot you too, he's asked? There's no answer. Can I ask you why you're not going to the funeral? Why you're not able to do that?
We've urged the people to be very careful and do it. The site is obviously under fire.
Do you feel you can guarantee their safety?
Thanks very much. Sorry. Yeah.
Is there anything you can do to ensure them that they are safe?
Not within the next hour.
Does that mean, therefore, that the Serbs are violating the agreement here?
Bye-bye.
On Kosovo's roads today, a trickle of refugees returning to the villages they fled months ago. Some found homes fit to live in, others found charred ruins. This man showed me what was left of his home, shelled by the police, then used as a base. Everything he owned was stolen. In the village gardens, the children find the debris of a war that killed some of their friends. Here today, there was fury. And there is fear. A farmer shows me what he found in his vegetable patch today. A grenade booby-trapped to explode once the thin wire is touched. Left behind, he says, by departing Serb forces. 15 minutes later, as we filmed this school, an explosion. Another booby trap, 50 yards from where we'd been. 2 men were carried away injured. There was panic. Everything here has been mined, he told me. And there was more panic when they discovered another man dead. What the withdrawing Serbian forces have done here, they are highly likely to have done in many other villages connected with these guerrillas, making it extremely dangerous for returning refugees. Close by, a few dozen Serb police remain, but more pulled out today, while others loaded up armoured vehicles, apparently onto trains to leave Kosovo. NATO judges all this enough to avoid airstrikes, though it decided tonight the threat should remain. At some houses in Kosovo today, there are no returning families. Here, 22 people died in the first and one of the worst massacres of this conflict. Today, for the first time in 7 months, their friends came back, but they are all too terrified to return here to live. You think Serb forces will be back here?
That they will be back here. They are here.
Among this procession of the living through the house of the dead, nobody believes the Serb forces have withdrawn from Kosovo for good. Nobody believes there is peace here. Not yet. Bill Neely, News at 10, Dragabil. Thousands of refugees are now returning to their devastated villages. They've had a year of horror. Today they found more. Bodies. I counted 5 in one village, in a house, on a laneway, where a farmer told me he'd watched Serbian police shoot his friend. And over the hill, 2 more behind a police bunker. The villagers are now searching for more of the missing, trying to avoid the mines and booby traps left for them by the Serb police. Today, the victim of a hidden mine was buried, a Kosovan rebel from the group the Serbs tried brutally to crush. Nearly 100 guerrillas put on a show of force today, sending, they said, a message to the West. These rebels are the next stumbling block to peace here because they will not give up their armed fight for independence. And while NATO forced the Serbs out by threatening airstrikes, it has absolutely no influence over these men. They are regrouping. If they relaunch their campaign, President Milosevic has the right to send Serb troops in after them back to Kosovo.
The KLA should not try to take advantage of the reconfiguration, the withdrawal of Serbian forces.
But today's appeal from the West is being ignored. The rebels have already retaken most Serb positions. Back in their homes today, this year's agony may be ending for Kosovo's people. But there is no solution yet to Kosovo's crisis.